Hello everyone, welcome to the annual INTJ Mastermind meeting. This year's topic is the same as usual, something that you all are very familiar with. How to take over the next 3 to 5 years of our lives in a meaningful and productive way. Now if you could please open your provided workbooks to page 5, then we can begin. Hello everyone, welcome to Asura Psych, and today I want to talk about the INTJ personality type and its relation to the villain archetype. Now you'll notice in a lot of fictional works that many people will type the villainous character as an INTJ, and I think it's because the INTJ personality type and the villain archetype share a lot of commonalities, and that's what I want to talk about today. Let's get into it. So I'd like to clarify first, of course, that INTJs are not all villains. That should be pretty common sense. But it is really interesting to notice how a lot of fictional characters who are villains show personality traits that are similar to what we typically think of when we think of the INTJ. And there's a few reasons for this. One reason is that, yes, I think they do share common personality traits on some level, but I also think that there's a large misunderstanding of what the INTJ type is and how they're likely to go about achieving their goals, and many people falsely attribute things to the INTJ personality type. So why are INTJs good villains? Well, it comes down to their dominant function, introverted intuition. Introverted intuition is a cognitive function that's going to be focused on abstract things, looking towards the future, recognizing patterns, things of that nature in its most simplest sense. Now, what this means for the INTJ is that they're going to be very goal-oriented. They're going to be focusing on the future. They want to dream up something and then push with everything that they have to make that dream a reality. And this pairs exceptionally well with their secondary function, extroverted thinking, because not only do you have a type that tends to be future-focused and goal-oriented, but you have a type who's very logical in going about getting that goal as well. This specific combination of functions in this order is often why the INTJ gets the nickname of mastermind, because they're going to be very future-oriented, but they're also going to be able to solve problems in a logical way. They're going to literally be envisioning problems that might happen in the future and then creating a solution to those problems before they even happen. And this is what allows the INTJ to be very prepared for what might happen in the future compared to a lot of the other types, because they're so goal-focused that they want to be able to prepare for any negative outcome that's going to inhibit them from achieving their goal. In my opinion, though, what relates the INTJ to the villain archetype the most is introverted intuition's sheer force of will when it comes to obtaining what it wants. In my opinion, no type is going to have more force of will when it comes to obtaining a goal than a dominant introverted intuitive type. And that's because they literally cannot think of anything else except their future-oriented goal. They are working constantly towards obtaining what they want, and anything else is just external information. It's just noise to them. They don't care about other information, so they are going to exclusively focus on the things that are important to them and push with everything they have to obtain this. And in my opinion, this matches well with a lot of villains that you see in fictional works because they become so intently focused on their one goal. Whatever it is that they want in life, whether it's they want to destroy something or they're trying to achieve something or gain almighty power, that's their singular goal and nothing else means anything to them. And that's why they become villains, because they lose all sense of what it means to be human and have feelings for others and be aware of the needs of others around them. Another thing that's really interesting about the INTJ being the villain is that they're directly oppositional to their shadow type, the ESFP, which is traditionally seen as the hero. Most hero characters, the young, naive hero who's starting their hero's journey, are ESFPs. And to me, it's really interesting to see that the shadow types of each other are the hero and villain typically in a lot of archetypal stories. And I think that that shows why we think of these certain traits as being either something associated with heroes or villains. So what's a good example of an INTJ as a villain? So in my opinion, there's one INTJ fictional villain that I really think matches well with what INTJs are really like. This is an INTJ villain who is a lot like what an INTJ is going to be like if they actually fell into a villainous position. And this is Virgil from the Devil May Cry series. Now, Virgil is Dante's brother, and he's a half-demon just like his brother, but Virgil becomes obsessed with his goal of obtaining more power, and everything else in his life becomes noise. He stops at nothing to obtain his one goal, and that's his introverted intuition at play. He's envisioned himself having that power, and he's using his extroverted thinking, his pure force of will to obtain his goal. And that's what the INTJ is going to be like as a villain. Another interesting thing about the INTJ type that makes them like the villain is that failure just tends to motivate them further, and this is unlike a lot of other types. When an INTJ fails, they double their efforts, they double down, and this is because they want their goal so badly that they're willing to sacrifice almost anything to get it. When you look at Virgil in the games of Devil May Cry, he loses, and that just motivates him further to get his goal. He pushes to a new level of sacrifice, then he loses again, and he pushes to another level of sacrifice. And this eventually comes to a point where he's willing to cut off his own son's arm to get power. And then that doesn't work, so he makes even more sacrifices. And this is what the INTJ is going to be like if they can't obtain their goal. The longer they go without obtaining what they want, the more sacrifices they are typically willing to make in their life. And this is what leads them to be villains. If an INTJ gets to that point where they can't get what they need in life, if they can't get to their envisioned idea, they're eventually going to make so many sacrifices that they become a villain in their own life. So repressed extroverted sensing also plays an interesting role in the INTJ and how they're going to go about obtaining what they want. And this is also very similar to the ESFP, which is really interesting. So the INTJ has repressed extroverted sensing, and this means that they're going to ignore external information that could potentially block them from obtaining their goal. Someone might come up to an INTJ and say, you can't beat that person, he's 4 times your size. And the INTJ is going to say, I don't care if he's 4 times my size, I need to win, so I'm going to win. Try and stop me. And this is also something that you're going to see with the ESFP, because ESFPs are going to be the types who are going to say, this person has done something wrong, I don't agree with what they said, they've hurt my friend, so I don't care if they're 4 times my size, I'm going to beat them. And it's really interesting to see the contrast, but also the similarities between these two shadow types to each other and how they go about getting what they want. Another interesting aspect about the INTJ as a villain is that they have tertiary introverted feeling. And what this means is that their feeling, not only is it neither antagonistic or supportive to the dominant function, it's also in an introverted form. And that means that it's going to be something that they don't even really think about. INTJs don't respond to stress with feeling. They don't use feeling to support their dominant function. It's just something that they don't typically think about. So when an INTJ is put into a stressful situation, they tend to keep their head cool as best they can compared to a lot of the other types, because feeling isn't even part of their primary way of engaging with the world. Now, of course, other types can be just as likely to be villains as well. My favorite fictional character who is a villain who is not an INTJ is Hades from the movie Hercules, because he's a very obvious ENFJ to me. He leads with extroverted feeling. He's always exploding with anger. You know, his head literally lights on fire with his emotions. But he has secondary introverted intuition. He's planning for a future. He has a long-term goal to obtain, but he leads with that feeling function. And it's really interesting to see how each of the different types could go about being a different type of villain. And to me, the INTJ just tends to end up in that mastermindy type of villain position where they're going to be the one sitting in their tower somewhere or working kind of under the radar to obtain their goal until they get it, and then they make this huge change. And that's why you see a lot of characters like Palpatine, who is probably an INTJ, he may be an INFJ, but dominant introverted intuition either way, are the type of characters who make these long-term plans and then they work towards obtaining them, and that's how they become larger villains than maybe even people like ENTJs who kind of just overtly get what they want out of life. All right, everybody, thanks for watching this discussion on the INTJ personality type and its relation to the villain archetype. In my opinion, this is a really interesting discussion because INTJs are an interesting personality type, but the villain archetype is something that is commonly associated with the INTJ. And it's just really interesting to see how these things overlap sometimes, even if there's not a huge amount of application to this kind of information. Let me know below what you think about the INTJ being related to the villain archetype. Do you think that there's other personality types who are better suited to be villains than INTJs? I want to hear what you have to say. I would like to remind everybody that I do have personality typing sessions available at my website, asarapsych.com, if you're interested in working with me to find out your personality type. This has been Asara at Asara Psych. Have a good one.